What's going on, guys? It's NYPrepper here. In this video, I want to talk to you guys about the importance of being able to be a nomad after SHTF. So I think a lot of preppers focus a lot on stockpiling supplies, food, water, ammunition, batteries, etc. And they focus so much on stockpiling supplies at their bug out location or their bug in location, but they neglect to realize that, you may have to leave your bug out location or your bug in location at any time. SHTF is going to be very dynamic. It is very dynamic. For example, look at the wildfires that recently happened this year in California and the Western United States. People had to suddenly evacuate their homes and leave overnight. And so, you have to have appropriate measures in place to be able to be nomadic. And, in a SHTF world, depending on what type of an SHTF it is, whether it's localized or if it's a national SHTF or if it's a global SHTF, you have to be able to be nomadic. You can't just put all your preps in one place and think that you're gonna ride out the storm in one location, because ideally that's the best case scenario, is if you have a bug out location in a secluded area miles away from the nearest highway or the nearest road in a very mountainous area. That's the ideal scenario, is to have a bug out location over there, and you would try to survive as long as possible there. But things can happen, and your plans can totally change, and so you can't put all your hopes into stockpiling resources and thinking that you're going to stay put in one area throughout the apocalypse or SHTF, WROL, Tiawaki, because you just don't know what's going to happen. So, some examples would be like, let's say, for instance, you have this perfect bug out location in the middle of the mountains, miles away from civilization, and for whatever reason, let's say a wildfire moves through the area, after the grid goes down, and you're in your bug out location and all of a sudden there's a wildfire. Well, you may have to leave, and you're going to have to leave quick, so you have to be ready to do that. You have to have certain preps in place, so this way you can move around from one place to another. Now, another thing too is that everybody thinks that SHTF is going to involve just sitting in one area and waiting for society to go back to normal. But what if society never goes back to normal? What if you have to move from point A to point B throughout the country? You have to go to different cities to make contact with other survivors of whatever SHTF it is. If it's a nuclear war, or if it's a, whatever, invasion of the US by a foreign country, or, who knows, it could be any situation, EMP. You may have to move around from place to place. Staying put is not always the best. Now, another good example is what happens if you're in your bug out location and there's a lot of marauders that are moving through the area, and they're going from, bug out location to bug out location, and they're targeting preppers with supplies. And, we've seen a lot of these people pop up on YouTube and other platforms talking about how they're going to specifically target preppers after the collapse of society, because they know that preppers are going to have all the resources, and they're going to try to go after people that would likely be well prepared, which are people that live in the mountains and rural people. They're not going to go after suburbanites who have 1 week's worth of food. because they know that there's nothing really there. There's no guns, there's no ammo, there's no food. But if they go to a rural area with, you know, a lot of preppers, they know they're going to hit a jackpot of supplies. So what if marauders move through your area and you have to evacuate? Or what if the entire Western United States gets obliterated by nuclear weapons? And I've talked about that in one of my recent video series that I started, which was prepping for nuclear war. And I talk about how the Western United States has most of the land-based nuclear weapons in the United States. And the Western US would be a huge nuclear target by China, from China and Russian missiles. All right, because most of the missiles that we have are located in the Western US, between Minot Air Force Base, Warren Air Force Base in Wyoming, and outside of Great Falls, Montana, in Malmstrom Air Force Base. Those three bases have most of our land-based missiles, okay? Land-based ICBM, Minuteman missiles that carry nukes. And those three bases would be a huge nuclear target. They would sustain hundreds of nuclear bombs, okay? The fallout cloud would be absolutely massive, and the entire Midwest and the West would be polluted with fallout, okay? So what happens if you live in that area and you have to drive across the country to escape the fallout? You know, if you have to go from St. Louis to, let's say New England, you know, you have to cross or get away from the fallout cloud, or whatever, you know, whatever the situation is, whether it's man-made or natural. Like in the case of wildfires, what if there's some gigantic wildfire that sweeps across the whole West and you have to move across the other side of the country in the middle of a grid down scenario? All right, you have to be able to be nomadic. You can't just be static and think that you're gonna stay put in one area and, you know, stockpile years and years of food. What happens if that food goes bad? What happens if your house burns down? What happens if marauders come and take your supplies? What happens if there's a wildfire, if there's a nuclear fallout? There's so many things that can happen to your supplies and your resources that you stockpile. So you can't just think that, you know, they're always going to be safe in that one location. And you have to be willing to move around from different places. And depending on the level of SHTF, you know, how bad it gets, at some point you're going to have to reconnect with other people and try to rebuild society. You know, you can't just live like a hermit in the mountains for 2 or 3 years and never come out. You know, you're going to have to move around. You're also going to have to collect resources and resupply. No matter how well prepped you are, you're going to have to go out and resupply your resources. And that may involve, you know, traveling long distances to explore different areas, different cities, different towns to collect those resources. And that may involve being away from your bug out location for days or weeks. So, you know, and you may have to travel hundreds of miles to do some recon and see what's going on out there. And doing reconnaissance and scouting is going to be very important as well in a long-term grid down event or apocalyptic type of situation. You know, you're going to want to go out of your area and see what's going on. You know, definitely you want to hunker down initially. When the initial SHTF happens, you're going to want to hunker down because people are going to really be crazy at that point. But after a little while, once the situation has run its course, it may be a little bit safer to go out. It may not even be safer, but there may be less people out there because a lot of them may have died off from lack of resources and lack of food and stuff like that. As sad as that sounds, but the reality is that probably 50% of people would die after a serious SHTF because they're not prepared and there's just not enough food resources to go around to feed the population of the world that we have right now. And if all our infrastructure collapsed, a lot of people would die. So But in those initial stages, when people are really scrambling and fighting for food, for every scrap of food, that's when you would see people resort to crazy things to survive. And you're going to want to weather that time period far away from civilization. But once that has already subsided, it'll still be a dangerous world, but it'll be a little bit less dangerous. But you will have other threats that will emerge from that new world that you're going to be in. Because whoever survives the initial wave of disasters is going to be a very crafty person that, is very good survivalist. So whether they're good or bad, they're going to be a challenging threat to deal with. But, you're going to have to go out and do reconnaissance and scout and see what's out there in the world. You can't just be locked up in your cabin forever. At some point, you're going to want to go out and make contact with other survivors. And, I know a lot of people are going to say ham radios. Well, ham radios don't always, work. And after a collapse of society, ham radios don't just magically work on their own. You need to have electric power to power the towers that broadcast signals. Other ham radio users are going to need to have electricity to be able to run their radios and things like that. So it's not going to be that straightforward. And so you may have to go out and scout areas out and do reconnaissance, and you may have to do long range reconnaissance where you go out for days and weeks, and you may even have to go a couple 100 miles away from your bug out location to see what's out there, to make contact with other people, or for other reasons. There could be, let's say, if there's a foreign invasion and the front is on the western United States, let's say China invaded the western US and you live on the eastern US, you may want to go to the western US to fight the Chinese invasion forces. So you're going to have to be nomadic in a post-SHTF world. You're going to have to be able to move around at a moment's notice. You can't put all your hope into a static location, because static locations can get compromised. Okay, there's no such thing as an uncompromisable location. I don't care how secure your bug out location is. At some point you're going to have to get up and leave for different reasons. And if you have to get up and leave when that time comes, you're going to want to make sure you have certain preps in place for that. Okay. And one of the things that I recommend for people is obviously a bug out bag or basic survival kit. A lightweight backpack with a few essential items in there. That's going to be probably one of the most important things that you can have. A good high quality backpack that, has basic essentials. I'm not talking about loading it down with, 50 pounds of crap, just basic stuff in there, basic survival stuff, and a good quality firearm. And, other than that, good clothing is essential, good boots. You're going to have to operate in different terrain, different weather conditions. So you're going to have decent clothing. And most of all, you're going to have to be in good physical shape. If you're going to be nomadic after SHTF and you have to, move around, and you're going to possibly have to evade people that are dangerous, for example, like in the movie The Road, when the cannibals come by and Viggo Mortensen has to hide from the cannibals. You have to be in good shape to do things like that. If you're out of shape, the cannibals are going to catch you, or whoever, or whatever the threat is. So, physical conditioning is going to be important to be nomadic after SHTF. And you're also going to want to have a lot of good skills. And now's the time to practice those skills. Shooting skills, self-defense, survival. There's so many different skills that goes into SHTF and being a nomad after SHTF. So practice those skills now, don't wait until it's too late, and it's at that point you won't have a chance to practice. But be prepared to be nomadic after a grit down situation, because you may have to move around. Don't put all your eggs in one basket and think that you're just going to be able to ride everything out in your isolated cabin in the mountains, because at some point you're going to have to go out and contact other people, or your bug out location, no matter how good you think it is, it can always be compromised by a wildfire, by marauders, landslides, volcanic eruptions, etc., etc. So that's pretty much it for this video, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. Be prepared to be nomadic, and thanks for watching. And as always, take care, God bless, and don't forget the 3 Ps: prepare, practice, and persevere.